Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce GTX 1080 Ti, the legend from 2017 in Ghost of Tsushima. This one is the Gigabyte gaming version of the card. We are running it with the latest NVIDIA drivers and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Ups. GPU-Z, resizable body is disabled because this doesn't support it. And we got 11 gigabytes of GDDR5X memory on this GPU, which means we should be able to run very high textures with not much of an issue. Lastly, we're pairing it with the Ryzen 9 7950X3D with half of its cores disabled, so it's basically the same as a Ryzen 7 7800X3D. This is just to avoid CPU bottlenecks. You don't need as beefy of a CPU to not bottleneck a 1080 Ti, but it's what I have. And over on the memory tab, we're using 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 MHz RAM in dual channel. Let's get into it, shall we? Okay, let's go over the settings first, and I'm starting at 1080p resolution. I'm also going to test this one at 1440p and 4K. On the anti-aliasing, I'm going to utilize the native AA from FSR3. This is still running native resolution, okay? It's just like DLAA on the NVIDIA side of things, and it looks much better than TAA and SMAA-T2X. These are all very shimmery options, and this one looks quite decent, and it only loses like 1 or 2 FPS compared to the TAA. And over on the graphic settings, we're using very high settings first. Let's go. Oh, and while it's compiling the shaders, check out our Discord page. It's in the link down in the description. Let's go. This is it, guys. 1080p, very high settings, which is the highest preset in this particular game. And we're getting 40 to 50 frames per second right here. That's pretty impressive. This is a 7-year-old GPU, and it's running it flawlessly. Like, I mean, it's not flawless. It's not 60 FPS plus all of the time, I know. But still, it's looking great here with these settings. Lots of detail here on the grass as well. No upscaling is being utilized. And it's holding 40 plus FPS pretty much at all times. It might drop into the 30s sometimes a little bit later in the video, but I mean, it's very impressive, isn't it? The 1080 Ti, man, it's a different beast. Roach, where are you? Come over here, boy. There we go. Also, there's something weird that you probably have noticed already. GPU utilization isn't maxed out. It's not a CPU bottleneck. I've seen exactly the same thing with the GTX 1066 gigabyte, although in this system that was running at like 90 to 95% all of the time, and this one is at 85% to 90%. But yeah, the 1060 on my Ryzen 5 3600X system was running at about these values as well. It's very weird. I'm not sure why this is happening. It's probably because maybe the drivers aren't optimized for the GTX 10 series, you know? But yeah, as I will try lower settings and like frame generations and so on, I'm pairing it here with the Ryzen 9, so we don't have any shadow of a doubt that there's no CPU bottlenecks. Alright, right now the frame time graph is a little bit weird, as you can see. I'm not really feeling much stuttering, but it's exactly the same thing as I saw with that 1060, yes. Oh, people are fighting each other right here. Okay, it's me versus everyone. Okay, thank you. That guy actually killed that one. Okay, wait a second. I'm going to take care of the archer, otherwise he might actually hit us in a little bit. Oh boy, come on. But yeah, as you can see, it's definitely a playable experience at native 1080p resolution with the very high settings. I would probably still use like high instead of very high in this game with this GPU to get closer to those 60 FPS without needing to lower the internal resolution by using FSR upscaling. But alright, that's it, guys. So we got 46 FPS average, 35 1% lows here at these settings. It's a decent experience. A little bit of a mess of a frame time graph right there, not gonna lie. That's easily fixed though by locking the FPS. If you were to lock it to like 40, I'm gonna do it right here in Rivet Tuner. You can see it is stable. It's just a flat frame time graph this way, no problems, and it's gonna be a smooth experience like this. Now, I just disabled the FPS lock, so we are unlocked once again, and I'm gonna try some frame generation here. Ooh, with this card, it makes a huge difference. Holy crap. So this is FG over native resolution. It's using 99% of the GPU right now. Interesting. And we are at 60 to 70 frames per second. It does look smoother, you know, although the frame generation in this game, if you start moving your camera like this, it starts stuttering slightly and it's not really as smooth visually, but most of the time it's going to be very visually pleasing indeed. It is, however, a little bit shimmery, I would say. Can't really notice that too much because FSR's AEA is doing a decent job, but on moving things, it's definitely a little bit more shimmery or pixelated, especially by the legs of the horse right there, for example, than DLSS frame generation or frame generation with DLAA/DLSS would be. Still, guys, if you are looking for that 60 FPS experience, this is now it. It looks like 60 FPS, it just doesn't feel like 60 FPS. Although sometimes, like right here, it doesn't really look like 60 FPS either. You know what? I heard that if you lock the FPS with frame generation on AMD frame generation, it gets a little bit smoother. It's just the same, okay. Don't lock it then. Well, even though this is above 60 FPS all of the time, I wouldn't play like this because the input lag at the moment is basically the same as half the FPS. Doesn't feel that bad, honestly, probably because NVIDIA Reflex is enabled, so it's probably like around 35-40 frames per second input lag, but it definitely doesn't feel as snappy as it did previously with the 40 FPS. Even though the frame time is a little bit more consistent right now. It could be because we aren't in a city at the moment. Anyway, this is it. I don't think you should play like this, but, well, FSR 3 works. I think I'm gonna restart the game because I will apply high settings instead of very high. All right, here we go. Everything is still the same over here. I'm just gonna switch it down to high. I will keep the very high textures though, because we have enough VRAM to have very high textures. And we're back here, and what a difference that makes. Look at that. We were getting 60 FPS with frame generation. Now we're below 60 slightly, into the mid 50s at times, but without frame generation. So it's native resolution here at 1080p. And yeah, it's definitely a bit more stable than very high. We're getting like, what, 10 more FPS, something like that? 15 to 10 more FPS, or 10 to 15 actually. Yeah, never mind, let's go. Roach, please don't be afraid of the water. Come on, everything is okay. Another thing that I really like about this game is that the wind always points in the direction you set in the map. It's pretty interesting. It's a nice mechanic, you know. I like it. Around here, dropping down into the low 50s. Still not bad. Again, like, it wasn't even bad at very high settings, let alone high settings. It's just a little bit smoother. It might look a little bit worse as well, but I can't really tell much of a difference unless you're seeing things side by side. The weather is also a bit different at the moment. We got fog, and we didn't have fog previously. Look at that. The lighting still looks great on high settings. It's a decent experience, although it's definitely losing to something like an RTX 3060. Usually, at least in older titles, this would beat a 3060. Actually, when the 30 series came out, this was close in performance to the 3060 Ti, which was a bit insane, you know. Yeah, 3060 Ti being close in performance to the 2080 Super. This was kind of like a 2080 non-Super, so it was definitely a little bit behind the Ti. But now, with new games, new optimizations coming in for the new GPUs, new drivers as well, and so on. So the 1080 Ti is falling behind a little bit. It's not necessarily NVIDIA gimping the performance of the 10 series. It could be, but I don't think that's what's happening. It's just that the developers aren't focusing as much in optimizing for these older cards, which is a shame because they still definitely pack a bit of a punch, right? You can see it with the 1080 Ti being an 11 gigabyte GPU with quite a bit of power still. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but at least it can still play Ghost of Tsushima just fine. All right, so I'm just fast traveling back and forth because this is the way you pass time in this game. So if you're wondering, all you need to do is fast travel to another place, then back, and it should work. And there we go. Yeah, it's daytime again. Kind of similar FPS, 50 to 60 most of the time. Very beautiful over here, actually, although way too contrasty in my opinion. Also, I'm going to try to aim for 60 FPS right now by utilizing... I'm not going to do FSR quality because that will lock it to 67% resolution scale. I'll instead do dynamic resolution scaling, which will drop the resolution down just enough to achieve 60 FPS. Huh, look at that. It's still the same, so DRS isn't working with Pascal GPUs, but it was working with 1060. I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm gonna try FSR 3 then on quality. Yes, apply the changes. Thank you very much. This is it. High settings. And okay, with FSR 3 on quality, the game is rendering at 720p and upscaling to 1080p. You can definitely see a lot of pixelation here. I don't like that, but it's just enough to achieve 60 FPS. Although I really wouldn't do this, guys. I prefer the native resolution because this is a nice game to look at, you know, visually speaking. And right now, it's way too pixelated for my taste. Obviously, opinions change between people. You might be absolutely fine with FSR 3 on quality, and if you are, go for it, because it does get you 60 FPS plus most of the time, which is nice. But yeah, it's not for me. Definitely. What is going on? Oh, hi. Yes. No, I don't want to stop here. Roach. I want to go there to the white fields. Still not dropping. It's hanging in there for sure. Above 60 FPS. Very interesting. Okay, 58, 59 right there. It's a little bit smoother for sure. But again, I would stick to the native resolution stuff whenever possible. Now, I don't want to do it on medium settings, although it would probably get around these FPS that we got with FSR 3 on quality. It starts looking a little bit worse, quite a bit worse actually. That's what I tested with the GTX 1060. Should we do that, guys? You know what? I'm curious to see how it compares to the 1060, so I'm gonna do the 1080p native stuff with medium settings. Yeah, let's do that. And for the textures, I'll use very high textures again. All right, yep, it's exactly the same as I expected. Like FSR 3 on quality on high settings, you know? That's exactly what I told you, and yep, it definitely does seem to get that. It drops a little bit further, maybe, into the mid-50s, but it's very similar of an experience. All right, so this is it. Medium settings gives us roughly double the performance of a GTX 1060, which is in line with the generation when this came out. You know, it was roughly double the performance of the 1060, I think. Maybe slightly less than that. And it's also utilizing 80-something% GPU usage still. That's a shame, you know. If they could max it out, I think it would be able to extract a little bit more from the 1080 Ti. And that would be able to maintain those 60 plus more often. All right, it works fine on medium, as you can see. And if you enable frame generation on top of it, look at that, almost 100 frames per second. All right, but again, it does look a little bit more pixelated around the character moving and stuff. Basically, everything that moves looks more pixelated like this. The days are really short in this game, aren't they? It was nighttime like 5 minutes ago, and now I gotta do the whole fast travel thingy all over again. I'm gonna kill you, buddy. I don't want to hit your horse, though. He doesn't deserve it. Let's go. Good stuff. Now you. Okay. Now you. Oh. Or you. That works as well. Come on. Okay, feels good. It's not terrible. Actually, I would probably recommend you to use frame generation depending on how much of that noise you can notice in your monitor. It feels a little bit smoother and the baseline FPS are high enough to where it doesn't affect the input lag too much. All right, now we are at 1440p medium settings. Things are looking much sharper right now. Yeah, I prefer this. I prefer this to whatever native resolution at 1080p we were using, at whatever settings. This is better, guys. 1440p native FSR 3AA, no frame generation or anything, very high textures, medium settings. I mean, 40-ish FPS, this is what we were getting at 1080p native with very high settings. It's actually a little bit better than that, I think. And it's keeping it above 40 FPS still. And I mean, it doesn't stutter, doesn't run out of VRAM either. We got those very high textures still. All right, it is a smooth experience, considering, You know, I'm just gonna go to the little area with a lot of yellow leaves right here because it's usually more intensive. Okay. But it's not a problem. Still in the 40s. Impressive stuff, 1080 Ti. 1440p is a pretty high res for its GPU to handle in 2024, yet it's doing that just fine. Also, power utilization on the GPU is actually peaking at like 260 watts at times, which means that it is fully utilizing. Maybe it just incorrectly tells you the usages on these Pascal series GPUs. Holy crap. Those guys, they are very good aimers, right? Holy. Okay, come on. Sir, please. Come on. There we go. I need to grab... I'm minding my own business. I don't even want to... Holy crap, dude. It's like a sniper rifle. Holy. Come on, Roach. Roach. We need to go. Oh, lighting. Good lighting. Come on, buddy. Do not run away from me. Dude, I'm calling you. Moving on. Around this area, again, it usually drops a lot of FPS, but it's not doing so with the 1080 Ti right now. It's staying stable at 40-ish. Very nice experience. 1440p delivers that great visual fidelity. And maybe FSR quality at 1440p will also deliver pretty decent visual fidelity. However, that frame time graph, again, is a little bit weird. Same thing as the 1060, once again. But it doesn't really affect the overall experience too much. I can't really feel that it's stuttering. Let's enable frame generation. We certainly have enough VRAM for that. And with FG, yeah, this definitely doesn't feel like 60 FPS, although it is smoother. But it's not 60 FPS, come on. It just gets rid of all of those inconsistencies in the frame time graph. That's probably why it's smoother. Okay, well, we can get 60 FPS with no major drops from it. This area is pretty intensive, you know. I wouldn't use this, guys. I would just lock it to 40 frames, have that native input lag of 40 frames per second, and not need to worry about whether or not frame generation is working or whatever. It's kind of weird in this game, dude. Let me just showcase that 40 FPS lock once again. No more weird frame time graph here. Very flat indeed. I think this is what I'd do if I was playing at 1440p medium settings here with very high textures with a 1080 Ti. Just lock it to 40 FPS, get used to the 40 FPS feeling, maybe add a little bit of motion blur if you want to disguise the fact that you are running a lower frame rate than 60, and play with a controller as well. That's gonna work just fine, and it will feel a little bit better than mouse and keyboard, although still very doable with mouse and keyboard. I'd probably end up using mouse and keyboard because it aims better this way. Yes. So yeah, this is it for 1440p. It's a good experience overall, definitely enjoyable on the 1080 Ti, and a breath of fresh air, especially coming from other games that don't run very well on this card, especially UE5 titles and the Alan Wake 2s and stuff like that. Oh, I forgot. Let's try it with FSR 3 on quality and check how it looks here at 1440p. Ooh, so these are native 60 FPS right now, guys, not frame-generated ones. It is feeling good, and it's not too pixelated. You can tell that it's not the same as native res, but it looks way better than FSR quality at 1080p. So I can see a lot of people preferring this experience to the 40 FPS one. Honestly, like, I'm not sure if I would go for this. On a 27-inch monitor, I'd probably go for this. It's so much smoother with 60 FPS most of the time. It will drop, but again, it's not frame-generated 60 FPS, so you don't need to worry if it drops to 50 or 45 FPS sometimes. It's still going to be snappy of an experience to aim and stuff. And it even goes up to 70 FPS. Wow, okay, good stuff. This is great, guys. We're finding a lot of different settings are playable on the GTX 1080 Ti. But what about 4K? This is where it's gonna get wrecked, isn't it? Alright, 20s. Yep, there we go. 20s isn't terrible. Like, this is actually what the 3060 was getting, I think, but at 4K high settings. This one is, of course, at 4K medium settings, so a notch below. But yeah, there's some hope. Using FSR quality, we might be able to make it playable at 4K and not lose a lot of visual fidelity. So that's exactly what I'm about to do. Let's do this. FSR 3 on quality. That's exactly what I expected with DLSS quality on the 3060 and 4K high settings. It went from 25 to 45. This went from 25 to 45 as well, but at medium settings instead of the high settings. And it doesn't look bad, once again. The higher the resolution, the less noticeable the noise from FSR and stuff will be. So this works quite well, guys. If you are at 4K, the 1080 Ti can still deliver a good experience with 4K-ish visuals. It's technically not 4K, but hey, even like the PS5 uses checkerboard rendering, so it's not 4K either. Don't you dare do that to my roach. Okay? You're gonna die. You're gonna be the first one to die. Now you. Yes. Do you think you can kill Roach? Of course not. He's my best friend in this game. At least until I find Jack. I hope Jack is here, by the way. I still haven't found any comments saying whether or not I can find a Jack in this one. A jaguar or something like that. Mountain lion, you know, cougar, panther also works. 30-ish FPS right here. GPU usage isn't really maxing out either, even at 4K with quality FSR. Really weird behavior once again. I hope to see it fixed, maybe with an update, but I doubt it, because, you know, old GPUs. But it's running well overall. I think I'd lock it to like 35 frames per second and be fine with that experience here at 4K. Let's do frame generation next with quality FSR. So this is FG on top of FSRQ, and it's definitely a little bit more noticeable. The input lag, not only a little bit, it's about the same as like half the frame rate. So yeah, it's not instant turning the camera around. That will hurt your ability to fight people in this game for sure. Not by too much, but I wouldn't use this once again. And I can definitely see that frame generation is doing something weird with the logos there. See that conversation logo? Icon, actually, not a logo, the icon. Yeah, it's flickering a little bit, isn't it? I've noticed that with frame generation a lot. Anyway, that's it, guys. You can reach 60 FPS average with FG and FSR quality. It doesn't look too bad either in terms of pixelation and noise right now. It's barely any more noticeable than FSRQ alone without FG. But again, since it's getting so much input lag at the moment, and it's not really that smooth or as smooth as native 60 FPS, even on the visual side of it, which it usually is, I wouldn't recommend this. Just lock it to 35, add a bit of motion blur, I think, and you'll be golden here at 4K quality FSR with medium settings and very high textures. Alright, that's been it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. 1080 Ti is still a legend, of course. It's still not dead. I'll catch you in the next one very soon. Love you all. Bye-bye.